My name is Zariah Blake. I was 29 when my mother-in-law stood in the kitchen I had paid for, held a cup of tea I had bought, and told me it was time I found somewhere else to be. I remember the light more than the words at first, late afternoon, gold and tired, slanting across the marble counter. I remember the small clink of her cup meeting the saucer, deliberate, like punctuation. Then the sentence landed. This is a family home, Zariah. Maybe it's time you thought about your own place. I didn't answer right away. I have learned, over the years, that silence is not weakness. Silence is where I keep my composure until I know what to do with it. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that for the past 3 years, I had been the one wiring $12,000 a month into the account that kept this house standing. The mortgage. The gardener. Her physical therapist. Even the small luxuries she called necessities. My husband, Elias, believed his mother's finances were simply handled. He never asked how. I never told him. I told myself it didn't matter who knew, as long as the people I loved were taken care of. I used to think love meant invisibility, doing good quietly, expecting nothing back. I am no longer sure that was wisdom. I think now it might have been fear dressed up as grace. I set my own cup down without a sound and looked at her, really looked. Beatrice Whitfield had never liked me. Not from the wedding, not from the first Christmas, not from the night I sat by her hospital bed for 11 hours while her own daughter didn't answer her phone. I had accepted her coldness as the cost of loving her son. I had told myself that patience was a virtue, and virtues don't ask for applause. But something in her voice that afternoon, the ease of it, the certainty that I was disposable, cracked something old and quiet in me. Okay, I said. Just that. She looked almost disappointed that I hadn't fought her. She wanted a scene. I gave her nothing but calm. That night, I lay beside Elias in the dark, listening to him breathe, and I thought about the version of myself who would have cried into a pillow and called her mother for comfort. That version felt very far away. I didn't know yet what I would do. I only knew that something had shifted, quietly, permanently, like a door closing somewhere in a house I hadn't visited in years. I grew up watching my mother count coins on a kitchen table, dividing them into envelopes labeled rent, lights, hope. She used to say money isn't about greed, it's about dignity, about never having to ask twice for something you need. I carried that lesson into adulthood like a small, sharp stone in my pocket. It shaped how I built my life. It shaped how I built my silence, too. By the time I married Elias, I had already built a modest financial analysis firm from nothing. Long nights, cold coffee, spreadsheets that felt like prayers. Elias came from a family that mistook comfort for character. His mother, Beatrice, had grown up wealthy, lost most of it in her 50s, and never stopped performing the wealth she no longer had. I understood her, in a strange way. I understood the fear beneath the pride. When the mortgage notice came 3 years ago, the quiet threat of foreclosure tucked into an envelope Beatrice hid in a drawer, I didn't tell Elias. I didn't want him to see his mother diminished. I didn't want him to carry that weight on top of his own grief. His father had died only months before. So I called the bank myself. I restructured the payments under an account with my name quietly attached. $12,000 a month, transferred without applause, without thanks, without acknowledgement. I told myself it was an act of love. Maybe it was. But love without honesty has a way of curdling into something else, a story only one person knows the whole of. I found the folder late that night, the one I kept in the bottom drawer of my office desk. Bank statements. Wire confirmations. A yellow sticky note in my own handwriting. For Elias, for peace. I sat there for a long time, tracing the numbers with my finger the way my mother used to trace her coins. I thought about all the family dinners where Beatrice praised her son's good sense in choosing a wife who knew her place. I thought about how many times I had smiled through it, believing my silence was strength. I closed the folder. Not to hide it anymore, but because I finally understood I would need it. Not as a weapon. As a mirror. 3 weeks later, there was a family dinner, an anniversary of sorts, 12 years since Beatrice's late husband, Thomas, had passed. Elias asked me gently if I still wanted to come, given everything. I told him yes. I needed to see her face when the truth was still just mine to hold. The dining room smelled of rosemary and candle wax. Beatrice sat at the head of the table, regal in her performance of grief, telling stories about Thomas as though loss had polished her into something untouchable. Elias's sister, Priya, sat beside her, nodding along, occasionally glancing at me with the practiced pity of someone who had never once defended me. "You know," Beatrice said, swirling her wine, "family isn't about who pays the bills. It's about who belongs." I felt Elias tense beside me. He didn't know what she meant by it. Not really. But I did. I thought about correcting her right there, laying the bank statements on the table like a losing hand finally revealed. I imagined the silence that would follow, sharp and total. But I didn't do it. Not because I lacked the courage. Because I realized, watching her, that humiliating her wouldn't give me what I actually wanted. It would only prove her right about who I was, someone who fought loudly for what she deserved instead of someone who simply, quietly, deserved it. Instead, I asked a single question. "Beatrice, do you know how the house has stayed afloat these past 3 years?" Her wine glass paused mid-air. "The trust, of course." "There is no trust," I said gently. "There hasn't been for a long time." The table went still. Priya's fork hovered. Elias turned to me, confusion blooming into something else. Recognition, maybe, of a silence he had never questioned. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I think we should talk about this another time," I said, "somewhere quieter." I left the rest unsaid. Some truths need room to breathe before they can be understood. He found me on the back porch afterward, arms crossed against the cold, my breath fogging faintly in the dark. "What did you mean in there?" he asked. His voice wasn't angry. It was frightened, the way people get frightened of things they suspect but haven't yet let themselves believe. I told him everything then, the notice I'd hidden from him, the calls to the bank, the 3 years of quiet transfers. I told him not out of vengeance but because carrying it alone had become its own kind of dishonesty. He was silent for a long time. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were grieving your father," I said. "Because I thought protecting you meant protecting you from the truth. I was wrong about that. I understand that now." He looked at me the way you look at someone you thought you knew completely, only to discover a whole unlit room in their house. Not betrayal, exactly. Something closer to awe, tangled with guilt. "She told you to move out," he said quietly, "and she didn't even know." "She didn't need to know," I said. "That's what made her comfortable enough to say it." I watched something in him settle, not resolve exactly, but a recalibration. 12 years of believing his mother's frailty was simple, apolitical, unearned. Now he had to hold a more complicated shape of her, someone capable of both suffering and cruelty in the same breath. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I thought about the folder in my drawer. I thought about how easy it would be to let this become a war, deeds and depositions, a courtroom of family grievances. But I had not built a life out of careful discipline just to burn it down for the satisfaction of being right. "I want her to understand," I said. "Not punish her. Understand." He nodded slowly, like a man learning a new language mid-sentence. We stood there a while longer in the cold, 2 people recalibrating a marriage around a truth that had been quietly holding it up the whole time. I went to see Beatrice alone the next morning. I didn't bring the folder. I didn't need it anymore. The numbers had already done their work the night before, whispered through Elias's stunned silence back to her. She opened the door in her robe, older somehow than she'd looked at dinner, as if the performance had finally slipped from her shoulders overnight. "You could have told me," she said, before I'd even sat down. There was no gratitude in it. Just a kind of wounded pride, searching for somewhere to land. "I could have," I agreed. "I chose not to, because I thought it was kinder. I see now that it wasn't kindness. It was control. I wanted to be the quiet hero of a story no one else got to read." She sat across from me at her kitchen table, the same table where she told me to leave, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. Sunlight moved slowly across the wood grain between us, the way it does in rooms where old griefs are finally being aired out. "Why did you do it at all?" she asked finally. "After everything I've said to you." I thought about my mother's coin envelopes, about dignity, About the particular ache of being underestimated by someone whose approval you'd quietly hoped for anyway. Because Elias loved his father in this house, I said. Because you raised him, even if you never once made room for me in that story. I didn't do it for your approval. I did it so no one I loved would have to lose more than they already had. Her eyes glistened, though she blinked it away quickly, unwilling to let me witness it fully. I judged you the way my own mother-in-law once judged me, she admitted, so quietly I almost missed it. I told myself it was standards. Maybe it was just fear. I didn't rush to forgive her. Forgiveness offered too quickly can feel like erasure. But I let the quiet between us hold something new, not friendship, not yet, but the fragile architecture of understanding. I'm not moving out, I said finally. But I'm not disappearing either. I'd like you to see me. All the way, this time. She nodded, once, like someone putting down a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying for years. In the weeks that followed, the house felt different, though nothing had physically changed. Same wallpaper, same creak in the third stair, same light through the kitchen window at 5 in the afternoon. But something in its rhythm had shifted, as if walls could exhale. Beatrice began asking me questions she'd never asked before. About my work. About the firm I'd built from cold coffee and longer nights than anyone knew. She listened, actually listened, in a way that felt almost startling after years of polite dismissal. I didn't romanticize it. Old patterns don't dissolve in a single conversation. There were still moments, a sharp comment here, an old habit of comparison there, where I saw the woman who had once wanted me gone. But I noticed something else too. She caught herself now. She softened the edge before it landed. Growth, I was learning, often looks less like transformation and more like small, repeated corrections. Elias and I talked more in those weeks than we had in years, not about bills or schedules, but about the quiet architecture of trust. He apologized, more than once, for not asking harder questions about his mother's finances, for letting comfort excuse curiosity. I think I let myself believe things were fine, he said one night, because it was easier than wondering. I let you believe it, I answered, because it was easier than being seen struggling. We both built the same silence from different rooms. We agreed, eventually, that the house would be put fully under both our names, not as a punishment to Beatrice, but as an honest accounting of what had actually kept it standing. Priya, when she finally learned the full truth, called me in tears, ashamed of years of quiet judgment she hadn't examined. I told her what I had come to believe myself, that most cruelty in families isn't malice, it's inherited blindness, passed down like an old coat nobody thinks to question the fit of. Slowly, carefully, the house began to hold a new kind of history, not one that erased the old wounds, but one that finally made room for the truth beside them. On the 3rd anniversary of Thomas's passing, I wrote Beatrice a letter. Not because I owed her one, but because I had learned that some truths deserve permanence, not just conversation that fades by morning. I told her about my mother's coin envelopes. About growing up believing that love and money were separate rivers, until I realized how often they ran together, quietly nourishing the same soil. I told her that I had never wanted credit for the $12,000 a month, only, somewhere beneath my own pride, I had wanted to be seen as someone capable of more than she'd ever allowed herself to imagine. I told her I forgave her, not in a single generous gesture, but slowly, the way frost melts off a window, clearing in patches until the whole thing is visible again. I left the letter on her kitchen table, the same table where everything had cracked open months before. I didn't wait to watch her read it. Some gifts are not meant to be witnessed. They are meant to be given and released. Later that week, she left something for me in return, not a letter, but the small gold locket that had belonged to Thomas's mother, passed down through generations of women in that family who had never once thought to include me among them. You've earned a place in this family's history, the note beside it read. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. I sat with it a long time, turning it over in my palm, feeling the smoothness worn into it by hands long gone. It wasn't an apology equal to 3 years of quiet payments, or a lifetime of small dismissals. But it was honest. And honesty, I had come to understand, was worth more to me now than any grand gesture of contrition. People sometimes ask me, when they learn the story secondhand, softened, retold, missing its edges, Whether I regret not confronting Beatrice sooner, more loudly, more publicly. Whether I regret not making her feel, even once, the smallness she had tried to make me feel. I don't. Revenge, I've learned, is not the loudest voice in the room. It is not humiliation dressed up as justice. It is simply this, living so fully, so honestly, that the people who once tried to diminish you are eventually forced to see you as you actually are. I still send the wire transfer on the 1st of every month, the number smaller now, since Beatrice insisted on contributing what she could from her modest savings, a small dignity she asked to keep for herself, and one I understood better than she knew. Elias handles half now too. It was never really about the money. It was about who got to be invisible, and who got to be seen. Some evenings, I sit on that same back porch where Elias found me the night everything cracked open, and I watch the light fade slowly behind the trees, gold turning to grey, turning to something quiet and complete. Beatrice sometimes joins me now, a cup of tea in her hands, and we don't always talk. We don't need to. My name is Zariah Blake. I was 29 when I learned that the truest kind of power isn't the truth you hold over someone. It's the truth you finally let them see, gently, in your own time, on your own terms. I am 32 now. And for the first time in a long time, I no longer feel like a guest in my own life.